I'm finding when I type things clear, I'm getting cut off so quickly. It can't be the social platforms themselves. And it's recorded, it's not. The FBI and forensics names, like with Whiting Forensics, they have crimes of Connecticut police departments, like Weathersfield Police. Increasingly, they attach me to fake conversations with themselves as when I was a kid and when I was an adult. So there's a Judge Napolitano. For example, I just typed, I spent all this time, I typed it nice, and then they change it. They fake it because they're searching, they're fishing for things they can bring before courts because I recorded the courts themselves. Communicating, confessing, demonstrating, recording. They have names on all sides of criminal and civil cases, the lawyers, their family members, their sources, their neighbors, etc., and the courts themselves, and the police forms, and the interbranch family members. At the same time, collusions with overt criminal enterprises and with private ones. Thank God I am not a lawyer, and how they will help because the names of the people of the sciences are a certain type of victim slash hyper victim. But the breaching method showed them how to respond to where and how they had to hide roles, blaming other things, others, themselves for why and how they are victims slash hyper victims. And they did that as collusion slash S. That's where and how, in other words, they have all these narratives and opinions with passions and emotions regarding world wars, distinctly from how they have treatments of would they force people to label as a Holocaust and forcing people to leave out how the black people's right survives and differences racketeering. In other words, this either this one or that one, and making that roles where everyone hurting each other because that was only allowed by the law. A breaching method measured and maintains the phenomenon of the name of the countries, A through Z, self-valued as where they could only be operated more remotely by the locations, areas, and states. Uses of our names of the human species body of individual bodies as systems tactile ulterior from nature's when it's also positive it's onto itself when it's also nature not only as criminal insidiousness nature other things others ourselves are being and have been forced to be blamed right where our founders communicated for us to blame how the three branches of government and how the intelligence, foreign and domestic, were used at times collusions with overt criminal enterprises, private ones, and terrorists. And nature itself was demonstrating that. But we have the scientific value of the breaching method, for example, replaced right from the communications of James Madison and our founders behind him and his plan. And that was before he was a president. And he didn't have free speech when he was a president. This wasn't as declassified. But rather than it's used by the breaching method, which everything it uses and does is through ourselves. So it has the experts of the names of the people of the sciences like American history, sense and sensibilities, as collusions, leaving that out from each age in nature, as collusion slash S with other natures and ages of campuses, including fire campuses and medical campuses. Families need to run in high line progressions into databases years later against strangers, pretending passions and emotions. And then, but no one follows mandated law. This will all have been observed, but they've been replacing and changing what's actually recorded in reality. They have been putting fake transcripts and communications and ties to police at Weathersfield Police Department through time, as their roles with overt criminal enterprises and private ones in a whole bunch of different countries, collusions with them at campuses also at the same time, and next to all natures of crime scenes, and next to town offices, community centers, Connecticut judicial branch offices, the Connecticut Corrections Officers. Time collusion /S with World Trade Center predicate acts, and since to hide it, also with the news. These are intelligence who have been using the right to lie and using the news to hide lie progressions, to hide secret things where they use that. That's where they confess to, where they debate it. They've been leaking that they're hiding their rights to hide lies and needs to hide lies. They're using that where they don't have the right to lie, and they're confessing it. The intelligence next to WFSB and WFSB, that in some ways they're the ones more completely guilty. In some ways, the intelligence next to them. The difference is also involved with them, with names next to the state corrections offices and all along Route 3 and its conjunctions. They are recording and confessing, demonstrating, and confirming. They have syntax of people involved with machining and Big Y and Stop and Shops. And since before those companies were there, involved with retired police chiefs, with foreign and domestic medical families, with sexual and medical offenders of kids. And I'm saying this calm, and then people jump into these conversations that we don't even know with passions and emotions. And collusion /S with interbranch forging and switching names. A police chief, Cintron, has his daughter involved with people with, multiple people involved with Mazzucato Bakery and Modern Pastry. Our roles with Jonathan Maiano. Recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed, involved with judges and prosecutors and foreign and domestic medical families and military families, with sequence shifts, identity thefts and frauds, with people on my street, with them, and people with their neighbors involved with them. Intercities. And these are people interstates and internationally, criminally foreign influence, but also hyper criminally foreign influence. Collusion /S with more child abusers, leaders of the kids, years apart, forced, and more with them that had also roles with other natures of organized crimes that had nothing to do with that. These are and the distinct natures of organized crimes, where the difference of that is also used to hide behind. So increasingly, they've been putting the kids to fake and change natures of relationships to themselves as collusions with identities and influences from off the campuses too, though, because it needs hyper additionally things to hide behind in the future. Increasingly, people tied to Ray Reynolds and his educators attach me to fake ties, fake natures of ties to Ray Reynolds. I only had one class of him in my life, and that was the only campus I ever saw him on, Ray Reynolds, which was I was in kindergarten. That school closed the year after that. He's increasingly rolls with names next to that live next to that building, and people with the name Harris, and people involved with them putting fake things in databases, fake ties to kids, fake natures of ties to kids, completely faked and changed audio and video at campuses, filmed 24/7. They put fake transcripts to pretend things were filmed that never were. There are only 3 branches of government that keep them remotely used, criminally foreign influence. So Wethersfield police chiefs retired, and their intimate ties have roles with intelligence families that used to live in my area, and a whole bunch of people tied to them who had collusions with some untimely deaths, and they were influenced to make confessions on my street in Wethersfield. And as people that were recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed, planting evidences next to my campuses, intercities, and at other places I live temporary, like next to Central Connecticut State University, which is also town lines, no. So in other words, these are also people, families with the town lines, intercities through time, involved with them with identity theft, fraud, slanders, with foreign countries. So who controls our countries? You have to observe where and how all these countries have collusion /S together, only capable of being. Also with they are forced, tricked, hurt, and persuaded to self-value collusion /S through subject treatments and or name treatments and or sequence evaluations and valuings. Tactical terrier from proper. That's one of the things that there are self-valued sequence shifts. There are self-valued rules of predicate acts with facts. The intelligence community force tracked her with foreign countries at the same time. They influence people to pretend they understand why people can't get a response from professionals, private, or the interbranch. If people try to go to private when they catch the interbranch forging names, switching names, and planting evidences at crime scenes, and with names next to them, though, they cover it. This is not at the same time. See, they're only capable of assigning guilt, leaving out their roles with hundreds of countries at our campuses. So people with Connecticut campuses have roles with Syria, have roles with Israel, have roles with Italy, have roles with Korea, have roles with Saudi Arabia, have roles with Washington, D.C., with 2 speech class teachers I had. I never had a conversation with them. They're needing to hide that because they have roles with people that increasingly have been planting evidence on all sides of my house, with Washington, D.C., and with the other as people involved with Saudi attackers before the World Trade Center attack, in it and since, through where they and how they are used remotely at location uses, like at the World Trade Center. Never stopped being used, having been used. Criminally foreign influence, tactically delusions raw. Also by people at and next to the state of Connecticut educational offices, Department of Education. There's a woman named Ruth who's recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed, involved with the confessions of people from other countries and Saudi Arabia, involved also with the John DeMoro, with sexual and medical offenders of grammar school kids and of middle school kids, and roles with identity theft, fraud, slanders, and sequence shifts planting with overt criminal enterprises, private ones, and FBI and other agencies. They have obligations to so people have been using the name hegemony, the word hegemony, leaving out where and how we know to an extent, /S, that our agencies at countries A through Z in their courts, they have the state collusions to an extent. They know that's true. No one has hegemony. Everyone sickly, distinctly prevented the quality of fact-treating nature, the aspects of fact-treating nature, and fact-treating nature itself, necessary to defend order. An individual is a finite individual, distinct identity of order, from how the individual species body is a simultaneous nature, individual body of order, but also simultaneous nature of body, distinctly, non-distinctly, simultaneous, / hyper-simultaneously. The same way the order of what is active grouped, like truths, each country knows an extent of truth /S. We know that the seasons are valued. We know that the seasons are showing us an extent of that identity relationship to itself. That is not us, it is not the other species' bodies, but it is all things anyway. In many prey boxing, this is why we have 2 eyes in the birds and fish. Even insects look like they have 2 eyes. Oh, it's 1,000, but it looks like 2 eyes on a fly, for example. In other words, they have the nature debate, contains quality aspects in nature that is cultivated as a certain type of victim predators / victim hyperpredators, and pretending other to an extent, otherwise that body is sensed, and that is adapted to, including if that body was a majority of people, or is a majority of people, including if it is everyone, as the phenomenon of the names of countries that could only be operated by locations, areas, and states. Involved with criminally foreign influence, tactically delusions, wrought readings of sciences and of the religious books. Per use /S also counters to that, like people involved with it. There's a Wayne, I don't know his last name. He knows my last name. He's involved with people from Berlin and Kensington, also with the name Yagman, involved with sexual and medical offenders of kids, and with FBI Director Robert Lusk and his co-defendants, overt criminal enterprises, private ones, counters to such as collusion/S. Then they are shown later. They need to hide that. They hide lie progressions by running in and acting, or at crime scenes, acting on both sides of issues, and fake motivations, even when they're real ones. And the people, so because they have to hide how they already had collusions with all names on all sides of cases, the lawyers and the interbranch putting the same sequence shifts and the same delusions. The branches of government, the suits that ties, counters, exceptions, are tactically delusions wrought at the same time with criminally foreign influence, fact, cheap nature, quality, aspects of nature regarding founding locations and values and names use and names/s uses, humanity. Discern how having black pupils, whites of eyes, is inseparable from subjects like slavery, just like the breaching methods reassignment of what's reassignments of what that communicates and is used to sense for. But everyone's sensing for the breaching method. That nature itself shows this is one of the things true always, that slavery and those laws were about. And they were forced by what was forced on our founders too. They were fact, cheap nature, enslaved, tortured, and extorted. You guys won't even allow the extortion of George Washington to be spoken about honestly. Otherwise, you change or fake what we said about the predicate acts involved against. The predicate acts methods too. Clearer than day, discernible as a scientific value. That has been replaced right where and how it is for scientific value. So replaced right from the communications of James. There's the law experts said, well, I rely on the American history experts. That's why I pay attention to the clearer than day delusions regarding summaries of American history and of ancient history. If they weren't criminally foreign influence, tactical delusions wrought, fact, human nature, quality, aspects of nature having been used remotely, would have realized. No one addressed how criminally foreign influence databases and roles pretending not to realize means to just change a little detail into a database and would be used predatorily, where they make action. The courts and the police forms never stopped having collusion/S with all natures of crime scenes. Forgiveness is because the difference of their guilt with that or the overt criminal enterprises, terrorists, even the differences of people that don't like them at the interbranch locations, at the crime scenes. Oh, this gang was killing this gang. These campuses have roles of predicate acts with facts against each age of fact, human nature, and they are connected. And where there are unconnected campuses, they're even connecting that specifically to having people pretend they don't realize that. And I don't know the people named Bose. And, for example, next to Fox Connecticut News. Increasingly intelligence families next to Fox Connecticut News in Hartford, Connecticut, which is next to the state capitol now. Not far from the used to be immigration and naturalization services. Now Homeland Security. Also recorded involved with World Trade Center predicate acts. And with facts. And with nature as criminal insidiousness, nature being and having been used remotely, criminally foreign influence, tactically delusions wrong. There are ones named Riley and Mike DeMaine and Mendez who have some sexual abuses of little girls involved with their roles with identity theft, fraud, slanders, and putting fake things in databases since they were kids. And now next to Fox Connecticut News in Hartford, Connecticut, also with names that live near me and people from other areas that came to my area to make confessions about this. Mike DeMaine tried to make a fake exception in sequence shifts involved with one time I went to his house and they tricked me to go there. And I was there very short. And he kept wanting me, I repeated, he wanted me to wrestle him on Mike DeMay. He was trying to make fake ties, fake natures of ties to me, and sequence shift cover-ups because he had roles of predicate acts with intelligence at the campuses and with the multiple police departments and police forms and FBI and foreign and domestic. These are also religious nutbags because they want to be called names so they could pretend not to realize what came first. These are also people with former director of the FBI, Robert Luskin, involved with a Thaddeus Grabowski. Also, and the main recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed that there's a with a Thaddeus Grabowski right before a 2006 district court case. He's involved with a bunch of people tied to a Brian Silver and people with the name Leahy, involved with sexual and medical offenders of kids, also with probate. Also, with the different positions at the courts, including even prosecutors and their kids, and judges and their kids, and family, extended family members, used to pretend fake passions and emotions, still, because that appears to be debatable. But that's recorded. That's also used to sense self-value rules with the sequence shifts that show that they were faking that. And they're switching names into branch. Increasingly, these are people since I was a kid involved with East Hartford intelligence and roles involved with Central Connecticut State University in New Britain, Connecticut, has roles with foreign and domestic intelligence with New Britain Superior Court. A bunch of names at New Britain Superior Court are involved, intercampuses, intercities, and with East Hartford locations involved with a Tony Tomorrow, recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed. Like 2 times made fake exceptions of knowing me. And I set up a kid named Sapati with his girlfriend right after I met a girl through his girlfriend, but they didn't want me to hook up. They didn't want me to hook up with her legitimately. In other words, I'm being forced to speak about those things because people want to pretend they care about privacy and things like that too. This is why they keep people from prevented free speech while the interbranch, since we were kids, they're putting fake transcripts and collusions in databases, increasingly with names next to the Connecticut capital, like ones with the name Mayano, their families, ones with the name Casper, their families, involved with intelligence families near me, and their educators with identity theft, fraud, slanders. These are little fakes putting fake things in databases behind people's backs. And just faked transcripts. And they, increasingly, people at Trinity College were influenced by lies told about themselves and about me, but by intelligence families that used to live near me, and by a whole bunch of people tied to them, involved with the ones with the Wethersfield police, like named Cologne and Smith, who have people involved from other areas with predicate acts against me on my street. And the police forms are forging and switching names and making confessions about their extended family members involved with them, with the child abusers, leaders of the kids. And so, in other words, they want me to respond so they could bring me before a court again, where they put more fake things in databases on a mass scale as collusion/S. Forgiveness is because even worse, Captain keeps that. Manifest that countries A through Z. Already they pretended they cared about due process dishonestly. They prevent due process and already recorded themselves preventing due process offensively while protecting other, while tactically delusions rot too, not just criminally foreign influence. On a mass scale, they prevent writing and had collusion/S with all natures of crime scenes. So even when it was real, when people they've been framing people, but also when they have people do real things, even murders, they're using their rights to lock those people up, and the people involved with that are using that to torture them, to keep their mouth shut about their collusion/S with themselves too, with the names that next to those body dumping spots involved. Totally different killers involved with them personally and professionally. Sandy Hook has a number of various natures of federal criminals that before they were caught, and ones that are still not caught, that are further then and now collusions with them. The Facebook pages of Wethersfield campuses have more sexual and medical offenders of the kids and ones with badges, foreign and domestic military. Also confessing this while pretending other is recorded. They should not hide and plot. And why is all my writing when I try to do writing proper get wiped away? People are trying to make it look like I don't communicate clear. They're fishing for means to bring evidence as their roles with all sides of criminal and civil cases. Already the evidence is hyper evidential. We're gonna have to discern it because it's available to be discerned. Black people, it is time. We have the same color eyes, different color eyes at the same time, relative to where and to how. The breaching method showed them they need to hide their roles with differences. Racketeering method with predicate acts with facts. I'm not even a lawyer. We're gonna delineate the delusions from the criminally foreign influence, fact, truth, nature, quality aspects and natures of the names of the people, the sciences A through Z, and of the names behind the people with the religions. In other words, they keep trying to say, well, these are evidence about the CIA. That we need people to do that, but not to show guilt, because the guilt we know we already. In other words, they agreed to be fake at A through Z together. Now that was used remotely. We're not allowed to use hyper criminally foreign influence, not just criminally foreign influence. We're not allowed to hide that. Change your fake what people say about that. That's why we have to address the delusions too. So there are predicate acts with facts, with people on all sides of at next to campuses, at next to religious locations, that also have collusions at other locations, and with remote uses, criminally foreign influence / hyper criminally foreign influence of corrections officers of Connecticut and names next to them. And associated with it, probably just driving by, there are proofs that they have people influenced to ask or say Steve things, and they record things. But these are people that record fake things too. They're putting fake recorded audio and video transcripts at campuses filmed 24/7, like Trinity College and Central Connecticut State University, involved with people from Wethersfield through time, who have been sticking predicate acts with facts, intercities, with intelligence, with a Colol family, an O'Brien family, and the Smith family, involved with a whole bunch of other intelligence from other areas, and other ones that used to live in my area, who have been putting identity theft, fraud, slanders, increasingly collusion /S with names on all sides of cases, including one in the world in a court next to the World Trade Center towers, right before the attack, with names and their extended family members, who also had roles with home break-ins in my area through time, and timed collusion /S with Wethersfield police with that, they were also with the ones that have been, one time it was not I had an idea of inventing a game that we throw something at each other. This is before paintball. And when I was in middle school, and then the kid up the street, there were two brothers, Andrew O'Brien, Timothy O'Brien. Apparently, demonstrably, they had been involved with multiple police departments and with retired mayors. Probably was standing too, but in other words, all kinds of natures of identity theft, fraud, slanders, fake and change reality, and mixed with they're using truths for lies. So then in the future, when people make subject treatments or describe instances, it makes it sound like what they're trying to confirm. Where and how they are shown, they need to hide how they had roles with use /S of location, /S collusion, /S with the /S part, the plural parts, being collusion with the hyperforeign, that which had slavery strictly, distinctly northern colonies, for example, southern colonies, and northern states, and southern states as the same breaching method that was entrenched before America's founders were born. They did not have free speech. The nature of debate contains quality aspects in nature that are criminally foreign influence, tactically delusions raw, which is relative to where and how others gotten away with being pretended. Like that, they didn't have free speech. How did they get us to the Constitution. They had to be forced to get the Constitution, and us told to get the Constitution unabridged, to refer to our founders, plural, as James Madison, singular. And then they went and got George Washington to agree to help them and to use that plan and to counter, extort, and force it to be the other founders in more than 13 colonies, in more than one country that was themselves tortured, extorted, and in fact, human nature enslaved. The same way our founders didn't have free speech once they were presidents, or once he was a president, James Madison. He still didn't have free speech. That's declassified. His plan forced the Civil War. It forced the North and the South to fight against slavery. And they were possessions of other countries, companies, overt criminal enterprises, private ones, everyone pretending other right through the campuses too. Collusion/S. Many ways, I tell Fast Boxing. So Ray Claw and Increase and others like have roles with like a Dr. Shub confirmed roles with spots in people around on Two Rod Highway, and there's a farm there involved also with Ray Claw and his roles putting making fake exceptions of knowing me and trying to frame me with evidences. That's why he brought he had a handgun that was a pellet gun. And he brought it and told me to drive down that street, Two Rod Highway. Something to do with Two Rod Highway too, with the Casper family that I never had a class with. I never saw around schools. There was one exception, and they hid that with people associated with and they hiding and faking things, which actually recorded with people involved all along, involved with the judicial branch offices, involved with organized crimes and identity thefts and frauds with people named Casper, and with other coaches and their conversations with people behind people's backs that they don't even know, and a Coach Hagenbar involved with foreign and domestic military and people associated with him. I never had a personal conversation with him. In other words, increasingly people with corners of streets near me have roles with him, increasing other ways demonstrated roles with interbranch forging and switching names and putting fake ties and fake natures of ties between kids, and then having those as adults jump in and fake and change what's recorded on social media in ways they were shown they didn't realize, because they had roles with databases since before computers, used by a human fact human nature breaching method, a predicate acts with facts delivery system method, a criminal insidiousness delivery system method, a hyper criminal foreign influences delivery system method roles, specifically have things like criminal foreign influences at countries A through Z blamed and not defended, leaving out its roles with them and with all differences with that. So in other words, Fox Connecticut News has some Jewish-themed families who scream out things about their partners too that are Jewish. And ones that I don't know. In other words, so increasingly the DACA program has roles with names along Route 3. One's tied to the name McCord and Mike Pandolf, involved planting evidences on all sides of campuses through time, with a whole bunch of other people I did with other instances, and with depositions, all sides of depositions, including with people involved with the depositions of former director of the FBI, Robert Luskin, and his co-defendants, and their family members, and neighbors of their family members, like an Eric Jensen, is one of the ones recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed, involved with state police and forensics names by people that live near me with the intelligence that also recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed. A Joshua Julian, they repeated a Joshua Julian, his name involved also with a Maria Pizzino and a Mark Violet, with planting both sides of issues and fake legitimate undercover and like directions to hide undercover and things like that. There are rules with overt criminal enterprises and private ones, not legitimately with intelligence next to Harvard Hospital, with the businesses and houses through time, like ones named on Mayano and at Demorals Market, where they were then, next to Harvard Hospital, and where they are now in Rocky Hill, and spots next to it. And in other words, and I don't know this Joshua Stryker if he's associated with the Strikers Cafe. There are FBI and courts that recorded capacity demonstrate confirm they have spots in Rocky Hill, in town lines, and people associated with a John Mayano and his brothers involved in intercities planting evidence, identity theft, fraud, slanders, with the ones changing and faking transcripts, fake recorded audio and video. Increasingly, they have collusions with people tied to it. That's like a Bryant family and a Khalil family involved putting wire crimes and wire crime methods with the interbranch family members forging and switching names of work criminal enterprises, private ones at the same time, and they're educators of these people. That's why they won't and can't get onto paper since I was a kid. That's why they have people online changing and faking what we say about serious things like World Trade Center predicate acts. Channel 3 News is recording, confessing, demonstrating, confirmed. They attached me to fake conversations with themselves and with others about the World Trade Center attack after the attack, which simultaneously recorded their collusions with people involved with the Saudi attackers and with differences racketeering. These are people involved with Saudi Arabia and with Syria, with the intelligence at Trinity College and at Central Connecticut State University. Increasingly involved with identity theft, fraud, slanders, a whole bunch of people tied to a Kalua house near me and their extended family members, involved with people with some untimely deaths at Trinity College and on my street. Even if any of that was made up, they had time collusion /S. We use /S of untimely death rules, and their rules of predicate acts with facts and conversations with police departments that also faked me with conversations with them. And they had time collusions with overt criminal enterprises and private ones. All right. In other words, increasingly there's a Kevin Dillon and people tied to a Kevin Dillon. I found out also an Anna Dillon and how she switches the name to Annie Dillon at location /S Lake on the sides of the reservoir in Weathersfield are people who have been planting fake and changed transcripts and recorded reality and sequence ships. Increasingly, courts have rules planting sequence ships and predicate acts with facts into their databases. And increasingly, to hide that, they also have the leading roles. And the difference of their guilt with that is what forgiveness is about, because that's an outcome /S that is maintained. Relative also to the rules of predicate acts with facts that the Weathersfield Police and other police forms have with Weathersfield Pizza House, which is also with the branches recorded, also grouped predicate acts with the state judicial branch offices, with names used remotely with the courts and all sides of cases, the lawyers, the sources, the family members, etc. And the news at the same time putting the same sequence shifts. Use /S is a right to lie where they don't have the right to lie. To create fake news, to cover up lie progressions where they don't have rights to cover up lie progressions and actual motivations. So who controls Syria and who controls, is one of the questions asked by a judge Napolitano in a recent video. One they changed, one of the ones, this involved, once in a while they'll swipe away what I type and won't appear. Sometimes in other words, Judge Napolitano, please get the interbranch on paper, one name and sequence. A bunch of people families with New Britain Superior Court and other courts, they affected confessions to me by a bunch of people since I was a kid from other areas on my street. And these are people increasingly from Harvard Hospital involved with identity theft, fraud, slanders, fake conversations with me, like these people named Leahy. Also with the news and interbranch of the judges and prosecutors. Brian Silver is one of the ones involved with District Court of Connecticut A district court used remotely criminally foreign impulse tactical delusions raw. Collusion/S with Harper courts and all sides of cases and depositions, including like before the World Trade Center attack, with people associated with former director of the FBI, Robert Luskin, and those courts' families and intimate ties at West Hartford locations and New Britain locations and town lines planting evidences. Also, as collusion/S with names on off the state judicial branch offices and corrections offices, increasingly timed collusion/S with people from other areas with predicate acts on my street and with federal crimes on my street that were timed collusions with differences, rackets, with overt criminal enterprises, private ones, interreligious themed nutbags. And they do that because then they need to pretend it's personal. That's why I had no response when Miss Riley said that repeated sexual things about my neighbor, and while Mike DeMaine contributed to it, right next to her, making it Jewish themed, highly Jewish themed. Collusion/S with also the KKK black themed, Confederate flag themed, Latino themed, Italian themed. Identity theft, fraud, slanders, differences, racketeering, clicks. Used remotely, criminally foreign influences, repeating fake things, and adding on to that. How easy it is to do to just change your fake and ignore people. That's what the law says not to do. So please, UConn, let's get them on paper. There are people with the name Zano also involved with the FBI and with the people with the name Violet involved with sequence shifts and others involved with sexual and medical offenders of kids, with the prosecutors and judges and their family members too, per Rick C. and Faglione. In other words, let's get them on paper, one name and sequence, please. These are retired mayors and ties to themselves too. You know, and please stop and confess to YouTube too, FBI and CIA. And we're going to pay attention to where you guys are being framed too. Where and how we know you have to have forced collusions because A through Z have logic, nature. You guys have speech on and values by differences in economies. Tactical communicating about that. Tactical terror from our founders communicated for us to communicate about that. Not leaving out how the breaching method did not allow them free speech with this. How it got away with that. How it got away simultaneously, forcing, tricking, hurting, persuading people to blame other things, others themselves, for its roles with that, etc. Who disbelieves?